Hi everybody. Today we're going to start on chapter 6.5, and this deals with fractions, decimals, and percents. So as you can see, we have three figures, and part of each one of them is shaded. Our first question is going to be, write a ratio that compares the shaded portion of each figure to its total area as a fraction in simplest form. So there are three important parts to this question. First, we have to find the shaded portion. Next, we compare it to the total area. And third, once we have the fraction, we have to make sure it's in its simplest form. So for our first shape, the triangle, we have 1, 2, 3 shaded areas, and 1, 2, 3, 4 total areas. Can we simplify this fraction anymore? We can't. So that is the ratio of the shaded area to the total area in simplest form. For the rectangle in the middle, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 shaded areas. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 20 total areas. But this is not in simplest form, because I can divide both of these by 4. And if I do that, I get the same fraction in simplest form, which is 3/5. For the circle, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shaded areas, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 total areas. Again, I can divide that, this time only by 2, and I'll get my simplest form, which is 4/5. Now these fractions are pretty difficult to compare. One easier way to do it would be to make them all have a denominator of 100. If you remember, the denominator is the number on the bottom. In order to get that to 100, I have to multiply by 25. So the equivalent fraction of 3/4, if I put it over 100, would be 75 over 100. To get the second one to be over 100, I would have to multiply the top and the bottom by 20, because 5 times 20 equals 100. 3 times 20 equals 60. And the last one, in order to get 4/5 to an equivalent fraction over 100, I would again just multiply by 20, because 5 times 20 is 100, and 4 times 20 is 80. So which of these figures has the greatest portion of its area shaded in blue? Once you put them over a denominator of 100, it's plain to see that 80 over 100 is the biggest of these fractions. So the circle has the most area shaded. So just like when we used the unit rate to compare prices, because comparing prices of each individual unit is much easier than trying to compare prices of groups of things, we're going to use percentages to compare fractions, because when you put everything over 100, it's much easier to see which one is bigger than another one. So if we wanted to write these as percents, 75 per 100 is the same thing as 75%. 60 over 100 is 60%, and 80 over 100 is 80%. These are just different ways of writing the same fractions. So let's do some examples of converting between fractions and percentages. First, we're going to try expressing each of these percentages as a fraction, but remember, it's got to be in simplest form. So the first way to do it is to write 45% as 45 over 100. Can we make this simpler? Sure. Both of these can be divided by 5. 45 divided by 5 is 9. 100 divided by 5 is 20. And that is 45% as a fraction in simplest form. What about 120%? Don't be put off by the fact that it's greater than 100%. Remember that all percent means is over 100. So 120% is 120 over 100. Well, right off the bat, I can see that I can cross off these zeros. So I'm starting with 12 over 10. I know that I can divide those by 2, so I'll get 6 over 5. And that is going to be 120% as a fraction in simplest form. What about this last one? 0.5% looks pretty tricky. Well, let's start by putting it over 100. 0.5 over 100 is 0.5%. In order to make it a whole number instead of 0.5, I can just multiply both of these by 10. That will give me 5 over 1,000. Because 0.5 times 10 is 5, and 100 times 10 is 1,000. So 0.5 over 100 is exactly equal to 5 over 1,000. But that's still not quite in simplest form. I can divide both of these by 5. And I will end up with 1 over 200. And that is 0.5% as a fraction in simplest form. If you don't quite remember how to figure out whether a fraction's in simplest form, let's do an example. Let's say we have 80% and we want to get it in simplest form. The first thing to do is try dividing by 2. Do they both divide by 2? They sure do. Do they divide by 2 again? In this case, they do. Do they divide by 2 again? They don't. What about 3? No, not in this case. What about 4? Well, 20 divides by 4, but 25 doesn't. Can I divide them by 5? I can. If I divide by 5, I get 4/5. Both of those are prime numbers, so I know I've gotten simplest form. So the trick to finding the simplest form of a fraction is to divide by 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and so on. Usually, if you divide by 2 or 3 a couple times, or by 4, 5, or 7, you'll get down to the simplest form pretty quickly. Here's another quick example. 42/70. It looks pretty hairy, but if I divide the top and the bottom by 2, I'll get 21/35. Can't divide by 2 because that's an odd number. Can't divide by 3 because 35 can't be divided by 3. Can't divide by 4 or 5 or 6, but I can divide the top and the bottom by 7. And that will leave me with 3/5, which again is 2 prime numbers, and so I definitely have the simplest form. The last 2 problems we're going to do are going from simplest fractions to percents. Remember, in order to get percent, I need to make this equal something over 100. Well, to get from 5 to 100, I just had to multiply by 20. So the top is also going to have to be multiplied by 20. And 4 times 20 is 80. So my result is 80/100, or 80%. We do the second question the same way. 9/4, if I want to make that into a percent, I have to make it over 100. To get from 4 to 100, we have to multiply by 25. 9 times 25 is 225. Remember, don't be put off just because this is bigger than 100. We can have lots of different kinds of percents. In this case, we've ended up with 225%. I've saved the easiest conversion for the last. Say we want to go from 28% to a decimal. All you have to do is take the number 28, divide it by 100, and get rid of the percent sign. When I plug that into my calculator, I get 0.28. And that is the number 28% written as a decimal. Another example, 375%. How can I write that as a decimal? I take the number 375, divide it by 100, and I get 3.75. I get rid of the percent sign. That is 375% written as a decimal. Going the other way is just as easy. If I have 0.35 and I want to write that as a percent, I multiply it by 100 and I get 35. Add back the percent sign, and I know that 0.35 written as a percent is 35%. Another example, 0.09. Multiply that by 100 and I get 9%. Say I have 1.49. I want to write that as a percent. I multiply it by 100. I get 149%. And that is all you have to do for chapter 6.5.